此地如镜 turns you inward, and you 成为 a 森林 in a 密谈。你心中的暗松 reach downward. You dream in the green of your time. 你的记忆是一行下沉的松树。Explorer, you tell yourself, 并非为此而来。Although it's good here and 清脆, you had meant to 动 with a kind of largeness. You had planned a 沉重的 grace, an anguished 梦. But 你心中的暗松 dip deeper, and 你在 sinking sleeper in an elementary world. 有什么东西 down there, and you want it told. Yeah, it's a beautiful original piece of writing. All of these bilingual pieces are combined with an image, and this one is a reflection of pines in water, so they're upside down. In traditional Chinese art, you have this idea of the sanjue, like the three perfections, where you have the image, the text, the art of the calligraphy, and then the actual content of the text. And so this was an idea of how to finally feeling comfortable enough with my calligraphy to combine those things together. And so actually, even though it looks like two separate scrolls, it's still just one photograph that kind of carries across from one side to the other. It's just that the left side is darker so that we can read the calligraphy. And the calligraphy was actually originally, I wrote it in black ink on white paper and then just scanned it and flipped it so that it looks more like a rubbing, like a stele, to give it a little bit more of some weight, some history. And the two texts, so there's one text by Su Shi, is quite well known, his Hou Chi Bi Fu, his latter ode to Red Cliff. After he's visited Shibi and he's on this boat ride, nearing the end of his trip, and a crane flies overhead, and he dreams about it, and he's kind of sharing his thoughts about that experience. And then the English text was written by the American author Thoreau in the 19th century, in a book that he wrote about a boat trip that he took with his brother on the rivers near his hometown. And in that story, he also, near the end of his boat trip, he sees these herons, birds fly overhead, and he's sharing his thoughts about it. And so it's almost the same story, separated by half a planet and about 800 years. And so I just thought it could be a beautiful thing by combining those together. And so I did a bunch of planning to see how to start the English and Chinese and end them at the same spot and mix the words together so that they flow. This is the image of birds at Poyanghu in the winter. And so with kind of the film, we can see the film grain also. There are so many different kinds of paper, and they have different levels of absorbency. There's an album in this show, this Beisong Shendao uses Xuan. Chuan meaning like the wing of the insect is so thin, but it's quite absorbent. So I find it's okay for small pieces. For bigger pieces, I like to use this Mitsumata paper, Japanese, it's like Ijon Picher. It's a kind of bark paper. And so a little bit easier for making large prints. Even so, like the idea is the thinner the paper, the better the result. This is the same idea with landscape painting too. When you first create it, it looks kind of flat. But once you mount it, the paper is thin. You mount it by putting a layer of jianghu, like paste on the back, and then white paper behind it, and then the white shines through, and now it comes alive. So this is why mounted works look much nicer. If you were to have thick paper to start, then it doesn't look quite as nice as if you have thin paper and then mount it with a backing sheet. If you think about a lot of the photography from the early 2000s, maybe like 2010, 11, 12, that time there was a lot more air pollution. It's much better now, but it's funny, it's almost like the whole country had this soft white light. You didn't have to worry about what time of day it was or whether the angles of the sun. And so now that kind of photography, if you want to do it without sharp shadows, then you have to do it either on a cloudy day or before sunrise or after sunset. But at that time, because of pollution, it was easier to photograph like classical painting. If you follow the evolution of photography in China, like the evolution of photography in China was because the whole idea of classical painting was to not have completely realistic representation. Like a lot of Western painting was replaced by photography because photography could do it more accurately. In China, it wasn't about that. And so photography ended up being like Jingshan. It was almost like a montage, building an ideal image, maybe taking a branch from this image and a boat from that image, a mountain from another, and you could combine it to create an ideal setup. And you can see it even in a lot of really nice contemporary Chinese photography now. I'm almost opposite of that in a way because I don't alter the content of the photos. I still want it to be like nature's painting, even if it was light that existed, even if it was just for a brief moment. And so, although I will crop something, cut it smaller, or adjust the contrasts, but otherwise I still want it to be, a viewer can feel a connection to nature because they know the scene really did exist that way. And so, in that way, it's still trying to capture the aesthetics of classical art, but without changing the image. One of my earliest works was a photographic album of Xuan, of Mount Hua. And the little seal that I carved for the title of it says, Mu Shi Hua Shan, so my eye learns from Mount Hua. And that's because there was a Ming Dynasty painter, Wang Lu, who he was a doctor, I think, not like a painter as a hobby. And he traveled to Mount Hua to climb it and paint it. And he, along with many other artists, felt very strongly about you shouldn't only learn from books and looking at other paintings. You should, especially if you're doing landscape, you should experience the actual place. You can create art in your own style, but it should be inspired by the actual place. And photography, by its nature, you have to be there in the place to capture it. What he said was, it's like Wu Shi Xin, I learn from my heart, Xin Shi Mu, my heart learns from my eyes, and my eyes learn from Mount Hua. So when you travel in China, you cannot escape. You embrace everywhere you go, there's some kind of history, some kind of story. It's like this unbroken thread of visual art. You can find it in other places like Greece or Egypt, a long history, but only China really has this unbroken art tradition. In China, many times when you visit a place, there's a story. There are steps up the mountain, and then on either side of the steps, there'll be calligraphy carved by famous people. And so you're kind of like, by visiting, you're now part of the story. So not only artists or poets or anybody can feel connected to that history. And so it's just a different approach. The first pieces, the whole inspiration behind them was to kind of break out of the usual rectangle we see with just a photo on the wall, because a lot of these Chinese traditional formats, like a 册页 or a 手卷, an album or a scroll, they have a rhythm, a narrative feel. They're like the movies before movies. They tell a story. And so this way, by just either looking one page at a time, is completely different than looking at it fully open, or looking at a scroll one little bit at a time. The really great master painters of the past, they would be so good at giving you a little hint of like, stop here, this feature on the side now, This is the main feature. Now you roll it a little more. Now this is the main feature. And so I wanted to try to include that somehow with photography. And also because, classical Chinese painting is not tied to a fixed perspective. It feels like you're taking a journey inside the landscape. But photography is almost limited by that spot where you're standing, the angle where the camera is. So by taking little slices and then breaking it apart or folding it, you kind of get close to that feeling of you can't quite figure out where the camera is. And so it was just it was a good format for doing that.
Yeah.
Very big series. It took a few years to travel the length of the river and photograph bit by bit. I mean, there are many classical paintings that have Changjiang, the Yangtze River, as their theme. And I had been inspired by some of those. Some of them are paintings, but also maps. And they have labels of towns and temples and other sites on the river. And so I used that almost as a starting point to do some research and see how either names have changed or places have disappeared or have become big cities, how the whole landscape along the river has changed. And so especially with photography, how it becomes more and more interesting as time goes by, I figured take this trip, record the river now, and then if it's, somebody does it again in another generation, it'd be completely different. So it really represents a particular moment in history. We had looking back, these photographs were mostly taken around 2010, 11, 12. That really represents a peak in economic growth, construction, a time when the whole country was being built. And so for new highways, bridges, buildings, all that. So the activity on the river of boats, dredging sand for construction, it was really kind of a high point. You still have that now, but just not at the same scale. So looking back, it turned out to be a very special time to do the project. There were a lot of big bridges that are now go across the Changjiang that at the time when I was taking pictures, they were only half built, kind of hanging there. And so a lot of times when I was doing the photography, I still had to cross the river on a ferry, a Xuan, but you could see the bridges be going up. And so then the landscape itself changes. The planning at home is really just the starting point. But then I still have to be open for what the reality is on the ground, what nature has to offer. And so just be ready for and prepare different options. I can give you a few examples, like in this scroll, this is the entrance to Chutangxia, the westernmost of the three gorges. And so I had saved like 5 or 6 locations around here, also in the mountains there on the opposite side, to see what would be the best view of the gorge. And on this side here, this is a 2010 or 11. It's not the same now with Daohang with GPS or things like that. So I have some rough idea from images. Okay, here's a road or a path, and then I can just ask. So we ask some villager there. He says, "Oh, I know a spot I used to go as a boy, where there are some rocks and you can see the gorge from there." And he go one dao, and he will cut his way, and we go to see. And so you kind of really have to experiment along the way and just be open to the options. Or like this one here, this is Fuchi. This is a town on the old Changjiang scroll that had a town called Fuchi in Hubei. And so when I went there, I had used the Weixing Ditu to save a spot on the mountain. But then when you can see when I got there, there's already some mining. And so the spot's already gone. And so I went the next mountain over, which was like half gone, like this mountain here. So because of mining. There's so many workers here. So I'm standing here near the edge taking a picture of the Changjiang, and they say they said, this spot here will be gone in a few days also, so the landscape changes so fast, especially at that time. And so then when this is done, they just pack up and they shift upriver. So really the whole Dimao is moving. Yeah, it's funny. It's like even though these images can feel quite silent, I think this scroll here, there's a couple of people like tiny little size, like a couple of 就2毫米, a couple of millimeters high. But very few, seldom do you see people in these pieces. This is Nanjing, right? And so actually in the image, there are thousands of people, we just can't see them. It's somehow like the feeling of 水泥, of concrete. It's almost like one of the defining visual aesthetics of our time. Somehow in images it feels very silent, but even though there are many people inside.